Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georja Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as the head of Sudan's army addresses the United Nations General Assembly in New York to advocate for peace in a devastating war for which he has taken no responsibility, his forces fight in the streets of Khartoum to push an advantage over the RSF militia. Also, a new report by Human Rights Watch criticises both DRC and Rwanda for their conduct over the M23 conflict in eastern Congo. And finally, something old and something new. Groundbreaking South African luxury fashion brand MaXhosa celebrates the heritage of its founder, Laduma Ngxokolo, whilst also having, for the last 14 years, driven the global creative growth of Africa's cultural capital. But first, the war in Sudan continues to fuel the world's largest displacement crisis. One of the men behind that conflict, Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, spoke before the UN General Assembly in New York on Thursday, calling for the RSF militia on the other side of the conflict to put down their weapons.
Countless crimes have been committed. Ethnic cleansing, forced displacement and genocide. All of this had been committed by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, which should be considered a terrorist group. This militia is continuing to perpetrate crimes, and it is most unfortunate that it is receiving the support of some states in the region.
And yet, Burhan's forces and those of RSF leader Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo have been accused of horrific abuse of civilians and have prevented the distribution of aid to those who desperately need it, triggering a devastating famine in parts of the country. Well, on Thursday, Burhan's army launched a major offensive in Khartoum and appears to be gaining an advantage over the RSF. As always, though, civilians are caught amidst the violence. Our regional correspondent tells us more.
For the past couple months, Khartoum had been relatively quiet. A few mortar shells fired every day, but no heavy fighting. So Khartoum residents were quite shocked to hear many explosions at around 4 in the morning this Thursday. The Sudanese military was using artillery and planes to bomb Khartoum. Later in the day, it started a ground offensive. It seems to be the biggest operation to retake control of the capital since the beginning of the war, and so far it seems successful. According to civilians living around the capital, the military has retaken control of 3 very important bridges linking the capital, Khartoum, to the neighboring cities of Bari and Omdurman. These bridges were under the control of the Rapid Support Forces since the beginning of the war. Later in the day, according to military sources, the soldiers managed to reach the city center. It's a first since the beginning of the war in April 2023. So how do we explain this success? There are 2 main reasons, apparently. According to military sources, the Sudanese army has been working on this operation for months. And then they also recently received new ammunitions, new drones, new weapons, new artillery systems, new ammunitions. So it seems to be very effective in the battle for Khartoum. Later in the day, the Rapid Support Forces published several videos on social networks claiming that it's still in full control of the capital, but it's not true according to several residents still living in Khartoum. So now the question is, will the military be able to push back the Rapid Support Forces outside of Khartoum? It's too early to say, but the Rapid Support Forces has been in control of Khartoum since the beginning of the war.
Bastien Renouy there for us. Now, a new report by Human Rights Watch has criticised both DR Congo and Rwanda for their conduct in the M23 conflict in eastern Congo. Our Emmett Livingston in Goma brings us more.
Human Rights Watch released a report on Thursday in which it said that the main parties in the M23 conflict in eastern DR Congo have put civilians in harm's way. The M23 emerged in late 2021 and captured swathes of territory, pushing hundreds of thousands of people into displacement camps around the city of Goma. Rwanda supports the M23 and has sent troops into eastern Congo to help the rebel group. According to Human Rights Watch, both Rwandan and M23 forces are responsible for shelling military positions near the densely populated camps in an apparent violation of the laws of war. In one attack in May, for example, 17 people died in 3 rocket strikes on the camps. But Human Rights Watch also urged Congolese forces not to position artillery near the camps in order to protect civilian lives. What's more, the rights group criticised the predation of displaced people by Congolese forces and the militia groups that are allied to them. Together, these combatants have committed numerous instances of robbery, killing and rapes inside the camps. arming and supporting militias could amount to a war crime, according to Human Rights Watch. It urged governments to pursue the leaders who are allegedly responsible for violating international humanitarian law and the laws of war.
Well, back at the UN General Assembly, Kenya's leaders said that despite skepticism and opposition to the initial plan, a stabilization force of police being sent to Haiti to help battle gangs there will be fully deployed by January. Now, Kenya's leading the 3-month-old multinational operation, and Ruto suggested that other African and Caribbean countries were also ready to deploy to support Haiti's pushback against gang rule, but have been prevented from doing so because of a lack of funding.
Our support for the Haitian National Police has significantly advanced the pacification of cities and towns, protected critical infrastructure, and relieved many communities previously held captive by criminal gangs. Kenya and other Caribbean and African countries are ready to deploy, but are hindered by insufficient equipment, logistics, and funding.
Well, in a gratifying change of tone, we now have with us Laduma Ngxokolo. Do excuse my pronunciation. He has been very patiently tutoring me, but my mouth is not working with it. But he is the man behind one of South Africa's most influential global exports, the MaXhosa brand that has been showcased around the world, both in fashion and art circles. His designs have been displayed at the Smithsonian and the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and he's a regular highlight of fashion weeks. In fact, he's currently in town for the Paris edition, and his littered looks are rooted in Xhosa culture, but are achingly now. So it is my real pleasure that you've squeezed us in today, Laduma, because I know that you've just run in, having just arrived today. Now, first of all, you know, from what I understand, it's a very cool personal story about how you develop your signature patterns and colors. In a weird way, your rebellion was by bringing tradition into a traditional rite of passage. If you wouldn't mind sharing that story a little bit.
Yeah, so I did a thesis project at a university called Nelson Mandela University in 2010, where we were supposed to come up with a design solution that addresses an issue in society, but also addressing environmental consciousness. So I came up with an idea of coming up with culture-inspired clothes for a cultural practice that we do as Xhosa people, which is a nation of about 14 million people, where every man that is 18 years old has to go through a tradition of manhood that is a rite of passage of the culture. But before you do the tradition, you have to give away all your belongings, including clothes, and therefore your parents have to buy you premium quality clothes so that they don't ever have to buy you anything. So my idea was to substitute the traditional clothes that they wear, because those clothes are all westernized. Mm-hmm. I believe that it was better off like for us to look at our cultural references to make things that are culturally cool and also modern, because the group that wears those is a group of youth, and therefore they're not really attracted to traditional like Scottish inspired clothes. Mm-hmm.
So how was that received at the time? Was that seen as like a big rebellion, or was it, I mean, you're so successful today. You're so iconic in terms of a reflection of, you know, a welcome, growing appreciation of African creativity. But what was it like at the start?
I'm a firm believer of cultural advancement. Mm-hmm. Of course, as you know, we had apartheid in South Africa and colonization in some parts of Africa, and therefore culture didn't evolve because of those reasons, right? As a person that loves fashion, that loves anthropology and culture, I felt like I needed to unfreeze that evolution in time and make it relevant to now and for the future. And therefore, I felt confident with the concept that I came up with. Of course, the opinion and feedback was based on society. It was well received, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, whatever that advances our culture in a positive way is things that we should embrace, especially when it has economic impact. When I started the brand, then I was a one-man show, but then now we employ over 300 people, not just in South Africa. We just opened up a store in New York, so we've employed a few people there and looking to expand as we go.
And is there a difference from what you've perceived in terms of the reception of your brand from different audiences according to like different consumers according to their geography? So, you know, do you feel that African wearers of your brand get something out of it that's different to those in New York, to those in Europe?
The reaction, of course, is different because with South Africans, they know the context behind the brand, but in America, they look at it from a broad context as African regalia, and therefore they receive it immediately as something that they're African. They don't go further, but then with time they keep on learning that, you know, this brand was inspired by the Xhosa community, but it does feature some other cultural references from other cultures that are magnificent within Africa. So they appreciate it on those bases. Especially with our take of modernizing it and not keeping it too traditional so that it fits within daily wear wardrobe instead of just wearing it on Africa Month or Heritage Day or specific traditional occasions. We make ready-to-wear products that people can wear on a daily basis.
And so what is that line between the Xhosa tradition and something that echoes that but makes it modern? Like, how do you, what for you as the creator, as an artist, is that line between, you know, acknowledging the echo from the past but also being future focused in the design?
Yeah, of course, that traditional practice is still there, but now we live in a digital age, and therefore the youth that is practicing that culture is dabbling into other things that are not even related to that culture. They bring in cell phones in that tradition, and therefore the fashion that they look at is way beyond what we were offered in my time. We didn't have cell phones, and therefore the brand that we created sits at a good time because they've got an alternative to choose what we do and various other fashion products around the world. However, the tradition is still quite strict, you know, on what colors they can wear and that they have to look dignified. And at the end of the day, it's something that is meant to impact you positively and mature you and learn more about your culture and your ancestral lineage. It's quite a dynamic practice, but I could foresee it evolving in terms of the fashion element of it.
So, I mean, you're here for Paris Fashion Week. Paris has, you know, been so at the heart of traditional expectations of international fashion ecosystems. All of what you've said about the very specific African facets to your hopes of what your work represents, does that have any part in what you do when you come to gatherings that are so important to your industry, gatherings like Paris Fashion Week or New York Fashion Week or London Fashion Week?
It is important because I feel like I have a responsibility to bring a different dynamic into fashion weeks. Of course, the African perspective is not being given the platform that is strong. We as designers have the responsibility to make sure that Africa is well represented. It doesn't only have to be me. There's various other amazing designers that are coming out of Africa, not just in Africa, in the African diaspora as well. But however, we're not on the headline of the fashion week. And therefore, I think that given the next 5 years or 10 years, we stand at a point where we will headline fashion weeks and have our voices heard and also acknowledged by the biggest publications in the world.
Thank you so much, Laduma. I mean, before I leave you, what you said there really does echo what UNESCO was pointing out just last year, that Africa holds all the cards to become one of the world's next fashion leaders. This despite so much African creativity already having informed the current leaders. But thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to us, for your work. Good luck on Fashion Week. Laduma Ngxokolo. Okay, I'm going to do this. Ngxokolo. Oh, I think that was better.
Almost.
Well, I'm going to practice. Thank you so much for making the time to come and speak about some of the work that you're doing with MaXhosa. That's all the time we have for Eye on Africa. Do stay with us. So more news and headlines from around the world. Take care.